What do you do when the floor gives way? When the life you meticulously built, the career, the relationships, the very identity you presented to the world, shatters in an instant. Most people panic. They scramble to glue the pieces back together, trying desperately to recreate a past that is already gone. They mistake the collapse for the end. But the great thinkers, the strategists of the soul, knew a profound truth. A crisis is not a verdict. It is a diagnosis. It reveals that the structure you built was on a foundation of sand, and it offers you a brutal but priceless opportunity, the chance to find the bedrock and rebuild something that can never be torn down. This is not about bouncing back. This is about building back better, stronger, from the inside out. The first step in this architectural reset is the most difficult. It requires you to confront the great illusion that caused the collapse in the first place. That illusion is control. For over 20 years, I was a general in the tech wars. I commanded teams. I dictated strategy. I moved markets. I believed I was the architect of my reality. My days were a relentless exercise in control, optimizing every hour, managing every risk, bending every outcome to my will. And it worked. I amassed the wealth, the accolades, the external markers of success that our culture worships. But internally, I was a hostage. My peace was contingent on the stock market. My mood was dictated by a client's email. My sense of self was tied to a job title. I was a king whose throne was balanced on a pinhead, and the slightest tremor sent waves of anxiety and rage through me. My crucible moment arrived not as a single explosion, but as a slow, grinding collapse. A market downturn erased a third of my net worth overnight. The pressure triggered a health crisis that landed me in a hospital bed, staring at a ceiling, my calendar suddenly empty. A key partner, spooked by the instability, walked away. In the span of a few months, the external scaffolding that held up my identity was gone, and I was left with the terrifying emptiness inside. The rage I felt was immense, but it was impotent. I couldn't yell at the market. I couldn't negotiate with my own body. For the first time, I was forced to confront the truth. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus laid out nearly 2,000 years ago. The single most important distinction in life is between what is in our power and what is not. My frantic attempt to control things outside my power, the economy, others' decisions, my own health past a certain point, was the very source of my suffering. The reset could not begin until I accepted this. This is the first principle of the blueprint. You must draw a hard line in the chaos. Here is your first practical task. I call it the circle of control inventory. Take a piece of paper, draw a small circle in the center of the page. Inside this circle, write down only the things that are completely and utterly within your command. Your choices, your responses, your judgments, the principles you choose to live by. Now, outside that circle, write down everything else that occupies your mind. What your boss thinks of you, whether a loved one will change, the political climate, your reputation, past mistakes, future uncertainties. Everything. This outer ring is the realm of chaos. It is the source of all your anxiety. Your life's work is to stop investing your precious energy there and to pour every ounce of it into that small inner circle. That circle is your kingdom. There, you are sovereign. As you look at your two circles, ask yourself these questions and answer with brutal honesty. Where have you been spending your energy? Are you fighting unwinnable wars in the outer ring, trying to command the storm? Or are you focused on reinforcing the hull of your ship, your own mind, your own actions, within the inner circle? The moment of collapse is a gift because it forces you to retreat to that inner circle. It's the only ground that holds firm. Once you have accepted the limits of your control and retreated to the sovereign ground of your own mind, the second phase of the reset begins. The crisis has done you a favor. It has demolished a faulty structure. The rubble is everywhere. Broken assumptions, failed expectations, a shattered ego. The temptation is to mourn the building that was. The strategist, however, sees the opportunity of a cleared lot. For the first time, you can see the foundation, and you must now determine if that foundation is sound. A life reset is not about redecorating. It's about excavating down to your core principles and building an entirely new life upon them. The Stoics had a practice for this, premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. Seneca advised that we should regularly imagine losing everything we hold dear, our wealth, our health, our loved ones, our status, not to be morbid, but to inoculate ourselves against the fear of loss and to strip away the non-essential. A real-world crisis is just this exercise made manifest, without our permission. It does the stripping for us. The question is, what is left when everything you have is gone? The answer to that question is who you are. I worked with a mentee, David, a man who seemed to be the very definition of success. He was a high-flying executive at a major corporation, with a corner office, a 7-figure income, and a family that looked perfect in photographs. Then, in a corporate restructuring, his position was eliminated. The shockwave from that event triggered a fissure in his marriage, revealing cracks that had been plastered over for years. Within 6 months, he had lost his job, his status, and was facing a divorce. He came to me, a ghost. He said, "Cassian, I have nothing left. I am nothing." I told him that was the best news I had heard all day. "You are not nothing," I said. "You are finally something. For years, you were a collection of attachments, a job title, a bank account, a role as a husband. Now the storm has washed all that away. Let's see what remains on the shore. This is your second task, the foundation inventory. This is not a quick exercise. It is a deep, reflective practice. For 1 week, you will take a journal and write down the answers to these questions every single day. 1. If I lost my job, my money, and my reputation tomorrow, what virtues would I still possess? What qualities of character would remain? 2. What principles would guide my actions if no one was watching and there was no reward? 3. What is the one non-negotiable value I would never sacrifice, even if it cost me everything else? At first, David's answers were weak. He was still thinking in terms of external validation. But by day 4, something shifted. He wrote, "I would still have my integrity. I never lied to my team. And I would still have my love for my children, a love that isn't dependent on a house or a title. And finally, the principle I would never sacrifice is my word. If I say I will do something, I do it." There it was, integrity, love, duty. That was his bedrock. It had been there all along, but it was buried under a skyscraper of ego and expectation. He wasn't nothing. He was the thing that remained. That is the blueprint for your new life. Now, ask yourself these questions. Who are you when the titles, the money, and the applause are stripped away? Is the life you were living truly built on a foundation of your own values, or was it a performance staged on a set built by the expectations of others? Your real work starts with the answer. You've accepted what you cannot control. You've identified the bedrock foundation of your core values. Now comes the most demanding phase, the forging. An iron mind is not a gift, it is a creation. It is forged in the fires of deliberate, chosen practice. You cannot wait for the next crisis to test your resilience. You must build it, day by day, in the small moments. The collapse showed you your weakness. Now, you will systematically turn that weakness into strength. You do this by intentionally embracing discomfort. Our modern world is an engine of comfort. Everything is designed to remove friction, to soothe, to distract. This constant pursuit of ease makes us soft. It atrophies the very muscles we need when life inevitably gets hard. When a real crisis hits, we shatter because we have only ever practiced being comfortable. The Stoic emperor Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private meditations, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. He understood that obstacles are not interruptions to our path. They are the path. They are the raw material of our strength. After my own collapse, I realized that reading philosophy was not enough. Knowledge without practice is useless. I had to live it. I had to stop being a man ruled by his impulses and become a man who commanded them. So, I started a regimen of voluntary hardship. It began small. I started taking cold showers. The first few seconds are a primal shock. Every instinct screams at you to turn the water hot, to retreat to comfort. My practice was to stand there, control my breathing, and calmly tell that screaming voice, "I am in charge here, not you." It was a simple, daily act of asserting reason over instinct. From there, I moved to other practices. I would fast for 24 hours once a month, not for health, but to teach my body the difference between what it wants and what it needs. To feel the pang of hunger and recognize it not as an emergency, but as a simple sensation I could observe without obeying. I deliberately took on the most difficult, tedious project at work, the one everyone else avoided, to practice facing resistance with logic and persistence, rather than frustration and complaint. Each of these acts was like a single rep in the gym for my mind. I was building calluses on my spirit, so that when the unavoidable friction of life occurred, it would no longer tear my skin. This is your third task. I call it the discomfort gauntlet. It is a system of weekly, chosen challenges. Do not start with something monumental. Start with something small, manageable, but meaningful. Week 1. No complaining. For 7 days you are not allowed to voice a single complaint, spoken or written. When you feel the urge, you must pause, analyze the situation, and focus only on the next productive action you can take. Week 2. Master a minor aversion. Take the stairs instead of the elevator all week. Get up the moment your alarm rings without snoozing. Eat a healthy food you dislike. The point is not the act itself, but the practice of overriding your desire for ease. Week 3. Seek out a necessary, difficult conversation you have been avoiding. Do it with calm, with reason, and with a focus on a productive outcome, not on winning or being right. This is not about punishment. It is about training. You are systematically teaching yourself that you are not a slave to your feelings. You can feel discomfort and not be ruled by it. You can feel fear and still act. You are forging an inner citadel, brick by brick, so that the next storm may rage, but it will not breach your walls. Ask yourself, where in your life are you consistently choosing comfort over character? And what is one small, deliberate hardship you can introduce this week to begin forging your resilience? You have weathered the initial shock, drawn your circle of control, excavated your core principles, and begun the daily work of forging an iron mind. The final phase of the reset is reconstruction, but you will not rebuild the same flimsy structure that fell. Every action, every decision, every brick you lay from this point forward must be tested against the blueprint of your values. You are no longer building for show, you are building for permanence. This is the essence of what the ancient Greeks called eudaimonia. It is often poorly translated as happiness. It is not a fleeting feeling. It is the profound sense of flourishing that comes from a life lived in accordance with virtue and reason. The goal is not to get back what you lost. The goal is to build a life from which you no longer fear loss. This is where action becomes critical. Philosophy, as a mere intellectual exercise, is a dead end. Its only value is in its application. Your foundation inventory revealed your non-negotiable principles: integrity, service, courage, whatever they may be. Now, these principles become the filter through which every choice must pass. You stop asking, "What do I want?" or "What will people think?" and you start asking, "What does virtue demand of me in this moment?" Let's return to my mentee, David. After he discovered his bedrock values of integrity, love for his children, and keeping his word, his path to reconstruction became clear, though not easy. The old David would have immediately started chasing a similar high-status, high-paying job to prove he was still successful. He would have been rebuilding the same hollow skyscraper. But the new David, the one standing on a solid foundation, filtered his choices differently. He realized that the corporate world, for him, had often required small compromises of his integrity for the sake of profit. It had demanded so much of his time that it starved his role as a father. So he made a radical choice. He turned down a lucrative offer to go back into the same industry. Instead, he took a significant portion of his remaining capital and started a small consulting firm. His mission: to mentor young leaders on how to build successful careers without sacrificing their health and their principles, to help them avoid the very collapse he had endured. It was less glamorous. It paid far less in the beginning. The world no longer saw him as a titan of industry. But for the first time in his life, his work was a direct expression of his core self. The chronic anxiety that had plagued him for decades vanished, because his internal state was no longer dependent on an external outcome. He was living in accordance with his own nature. This is your final practical task: implementing the virtue filter. Before any significant decision, accepting a job, starting a relationship, making a large investment, engaging in a conflict, you must pause and ask yourself 3 questions. 1. Alignment. Does this action align with my core principles, the ones I identified in my foundation inventory? 2. Control. Is my focus on the action I am about to take, or am I fixated on a specific outcome? 3. Fortitude. Will this choice move me toward a state of inner strength and self-command, or toward a state of needing external validation and approval? This filter simplifies the chaos of decision-making. There will still be difficult choices, but you will have a true north. You are no longer just reacting to life, you are deliberately creating it, one virtuous choice at a time. The ultimate freedom is not having everything you want, but building a self that no external event can take away from you. The collapse was not the end of your story. It was the violent, necessary clearing of the ground so you could finally begin to write it. Now, ask yourself the final questions. Are your daily actions a reflection of your deepest values, or a reaction to your immediate desires and fears? And what would you build? What life? What career? What relationships? If you were no longer afraid of it all falling apart again?